Hello and a very warm welcome to the France 24 interview. I'm Sanam Chantier. Today we come to you from Dubai and I'm joined here by His Excellency Jamal Al-Mushrakh. He's the Director of the Emirati Foreign Ministry's Policy Planning Department. Sir, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Welcome to the United Arab Emirates.
Thank you very much. Now, a peace deal was on Tuesday signed on the south lawns of the White House between Israel and the UAE. Can you tell us how the UAE is set to benefit from this?
The benefits of this agreement, Sanam, are enormous. The prospects of cooperation in different fields, ranging from aviation to tourism to food security to technology, it's a very long list of opportunities that are really at hand. What is important to indicate in this accord is that this accord is not only for the benefit of the United Arab Emirates and Israel, but for the benefit of the Palestinian people and the Middle East. It's very important to focus on that this accord provides hope to the region, and it provides hope to the youth of the region, and this is what we strive for through this accord.
I will come back to the regional element a little bit later in the interview. For the time being, can you tell us what sort of preparations the UAE is currently in the process of making when it comes to welcoming the Israeli businesses and tourists, if you like?
The preparations are taking their gradual form, which would require the signing of various memorandums of understanding in protection of investment, aviation, double taxation, and so forth. So these are the stepping stones towards reaching these types of businesses to be able to flourish, for joint ventures to occur, for a more prosperous way of cooperation, really.
Jamal Al-Mushrakh, you mentioned just moments ago that this agreement could pave the way for peace for Palestinians, returning to that question of the region challenges. Do you think we can really call this a historic, a seismic agreement, given that on Tuesday, neither the US President Donald Trump, who has mediated this agreement, nor the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the other party to this agreement, neither of them mentioned Palestinians in their addresses?
It is indeed a seismic accord. Traditionally, the policy of the empty chair, or laissez vide, is a policy that hasn't been very effective in dealing with the issue. Dialogue with Israel, a dialogue between the Palestinians and the Israelis, is really at the core of the solution. And what this accord has provided is hope for the preservation of the two-state solution, and hope for the Palestinians to be able to rightfully have their own country with East Jerusalem as their capital.
There is hope, but there is also fear, given that the Abraham Accord itself, it doesn't mention Palestinians either.
The accord does refer at the beginning to previous agreements. As you know, we follow in the footsteps of Egypt and Jordan in signing such an accord. And again, the benefit of the Palestinian people is really instrumental in this accord. It is the Palestinian people that will decide eventually with the Israelis the way forward. And what this accord has done is give hopes for peace in the region. That is the overarching theme, really, of the last month, of the last less than 24 hours since the signing. Really, the word hope for the region, the word hope is a word that we need to see more of in the news. We have gone through a very turbulent time in the past year, a very uncertain time in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and many other conflicts. And it is high time that the Palestinians have the chance, have the opportunity to move towards a peaceful solution.
But we've heard them say, and they've used rather strong language, saying they do feel abandoned. And I suppose in a way that may have been reinforced for them when yesterday, during that agreement, during the signing of that historic accord, as you mentioned, Benjamin Netanyahu didn't necessarily take the topic of annexation off the table. It seems that it's merely being postponed.
Again, the Palestinian cause for the UAE is at the core of our foreign policy, is at the heart of our really policy in the region, that there must be a solution to this cause. And as the United Arab Emirates, we have never abandoned our Palestinian brothers and sisters, and we will never abandon them. And this accord was not at the expense of the Palestinians. It was a prerequisite, one of the prerequisites was the halting of annexation.
And you've actually spoken about the halting of annexation in previous interviews. Your Excellency, what would it mean for this agreement that has been clinched if, let's say, Israel were to go back to annexing parts of the West Bank? What would that mean for the UAE?
As I mentioned, the significance of this agreement is the U.S. involvement and the assurances that we have that annexation is halted. And we are very much optimistic due to these assurances, really. And we are looking at it as an opportunity to be able to preserve this two-state solution and have a dialogue that would really ensure that a peaceful solution is intact.
Very hopeful language coming from you. I'd like to move on to another regional topic, of course, the Iran perspective. Is it fair to say that one of the reasons behind this normalization agreement is in a way to unite in the face of regional threats, and of course Tehran is deemed to be a threat to Abu Dhabi?
This accord is by no means directed at Iran or any other country. This accord is directed at prosperity, at cooperation, at moving beyond the impasse we've had due to many years of no dialogue, really, with Israel. And dialogue is the only way forward. Tolerance is the only way forward. De-escalation is the only way forward.
There has been a relationship over the past decades, albeit outside an agreement, sort of behind the closed curtains.
Every agreement has a preparation, really. And as you've seen in the last couple of years, we have really been focusing on really the concept of tolerance. The Jewish community in the United Arab Emirates, the Abrahamic family house that we are set to open, and hosting IRENA, where Israel is a member. So it's very, I would say, incremental steps really that have led to this. It did not come out of nowhere.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you've been keeping a very close eye on the reactions coming out of the region. The Iranians saying they do deem this to be somewhat of a threat because at this stage and from now going forward, Israel does have a foothold, if you like, in Iran's very immediate close neighborhood.
As I mentioned, this accord is not directed at Iran or any other country. It's directed at having a peaceful dialogue. It's directed at combining areas of expertise between countries, and really that is the message of this accord, to have a hopeful, more meaningful message towards the future for the people of the region. And
would you be open to also negotiations in a bid to increase this desire for peace in the region with the Iranians?
Iranians have been our neighbors for centuries. We do have an economic relationship with Iran, and we have always called for de-escalation in the Arabian Gulf. And we will continue to call for de-escalation in the Arabian Gulf. We will continue to call for a peaceful solution to all differences.
Now, I do want to speak about this agreement, as we've been speaking about it already, has been denounced by different factions across the political spectrum in Iran. I want to get your reaction to a statement from the country's Revolutionary Guards, who, after the agreement was announced, they went as far as saying that this could bring about, and this is a quote, a dangerous future for the UAE leadership. Do you see that as a direct threat?
As we mentioned in our previous statements, that such rhetoric is very counterproductive to stability in the region. It was the UAE's sovereign decision to embark on commencing bilateral relations with Israel.
Let's end with the Saudi question, Your Excellency. Do you think the conservative kingdom, Saudi Arabia, will follow suit anytime soon?
It is within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's sovereign decision whether they wish to do so or not. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a cornerstone of stability in the Middle East.
On that note, Your Excellency, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Jamal Al-Mushrakh, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us here on France 24, and thank you for watching this edition of The Interview. Do stay tuned.